On May 7, 2001, a quiet small town in Germany became the center of one of the most unsettling and controversial criminal cases in modern history. 9-year-old Peggy Knobloch vanished without a trace, leaving behind a grieving family, unanswered questions, and a series of investigations that would stretch for more than a decade. The case seemed straightforward at first, but what followed was a labyrinth of confusion, a maze of false confessions, broken legal systems, and a haunting discovery that wouldn't come until 15 years later. But even after all this time, the truth about what happened to Peggy remains elusive, leaving a community forever marked by the dark shadows of her disappearance. This is the story of Peggy Knobloch, a case that still sends chills down the spine. It was an ordinary Monday on May 7, 2001, when Peggy Knobloch, a lively and cheerful 9-year-old girl, left her school in Lichtenberg, Germany. She was on her way home, just like any other day. Peggy's house was located in a small, tight-knit community near the market square. Her mother, a nurse who worked long shifts at the local hospital, wasn't home when Peggy returned from school, but Peggy was accustomed to this. Her mother had arranged for Peggy to have a key, and she often spent time with neighbors or stopped by a local restaurant to grab lunch after school. But this time, Peggy didn't make it home. It was around 1:30 p.m., and Peggy was only about 50 meters from her home when she vanished without a trace. Her mother wasn't immediately worried. After all, Peggy had often spent time away from home. However, as hours passed and Peggy didn't return, her family grew frantic. The search for Peggy quickly escalated into a massive effort. Police forces combed through the local area, and soon the investigation expanded to include neighboring regions, even stretching across borders to the Czech Republic and Turkey. Despite a reward of 55,000 Deutsche Marks and more than 4,800 leads, there was no sign of Peggy. For the next several days, hope turned to despair. Peggy's family was plunged into agony, unsure of what had happened to their little girl. As the investigation unfolded, a man named Ulvi Kulach became the focus of attention. Kulach, a man with an intellectual disability, had been known to the police due to previous offenses. He lived in the same small town as Peggy and was questioned soon after her disappearance. Initially, Kulach had provided an alibi, claiming his mother had arranged for him to be elsewhere at the time of Peggy's disappearance. But something about Kulach didn't sit right with investigators, and as time passed, they began to circle back to him. In February 2002, a new investigative team was assigned to the case. Led by Wolfgang Geyer, the team reviewed the evidence and re-examined Kulach. It wasn't long before Kulach was arrested and interrogated again. After intense questioning, Kulach confessed to a shocking crime. He claimed that on May 3, 2001, just days before Peggy's disappearance, he had sexually abused her in his apartment. Then, on May 7th, he said he saw Peggy on her way home from school and wanted to apologize to her. According to his confession, Peggy had run away from him, threatening to expose him. He chased her, caught up with her in the town's central square, and after a brief struggle, he said she screamed at the top of her lungs. Panicking, Kulach said he covered her mouth and nose until she stopped moving. In a twist that would haunt the case for years, Kulach claimed that his father had helped him dispose of Peggy's body. In a phone call, which was wiretapped, Kulach implicated his father in the crime, leading to a temporary detention of the man. The confession was shocking, and investigators believed they had finally found their killer. But there was a major problem. The confession was inconsistent, and there was no physical evidence to support Kulach's claims. There was no body, no DNA, and no forensic evidence linking Kulach to Peggy's death. Worse still, Knobloch later retracted his confession. He maintained that while he had abused Peggy, he had not killed her. Knobloch's defense team argued that the confession was the result of long, grueling interrogations without legal representation. They suggested that Knobloch, due to his intellectual disabilities, had been manipulated by the police into fabricating a detailed story. No audio recordings existed of the confession, only the recollections of the sole investigator involved. The defense argued that Knobloch could not have come up with such an elaborate account on his own. Despite the lack of physical evidence and the retraction of the confession, the trial against Knobloch went forward. On September 30, 2003, the Hof Regional Court began proceedings. The trial was highly controversial, with many questioning the validity of the confession. However, on April 30, 2004, the court found Knobloch guilty of the murder of Peggy Knobloch and sentenced him to life in prison. The main evidence against Knobloch was his confession. Expert testimony from psychiatrist Hans Ludwig Kroeber argued that Knobloch's detailed account was unlikely to have been fabricated, given his cognitive limitations. With an IQ of just 68, Knobloch's defense team argued that he lacked the capacity to lie in such a sophisticated way, suggesting that his account of events must have been based on real experiences. Despite the shaky evidence, the court believed the confession was credible enough to secure a conviction. The ruling sparked outrage, especially among Knobloch's supporters, who believed he had been wrongfully convicted. They argued that Knobloch's conviction was built on a confession obtained through questionable means. The defense appealed the verdict, but in January 2005, the Federal Court of Justice upheld the life sentence, finalizing Knobloch's conviction. But the case didn't end there. In December 2013, after years of legal battles and mounting pressure, the Bayreuth Regional Court finally ordered a retrial. This was a significant development, as Knobloch's defense team had uncovered new evidence. A key witness from the original case, an inmate who had previously testified against Knobloch, retracted his testimony, claiming he had been coerced by the police. This revelation prompted the court to reopen the case and take a closer look at the evidence. The retrial, which began in April 2014, brought to light serious flaws in the original proceedings. The court concluded that Knobloch's confession could not be trusted, and after careful consideration, on May 14, 2014, Knobloch was acquitted of all charges. While some believed Knobloch was guilty, many others argued that he had been wrongfully imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. The case had left a deep scar on the community, and the uncertainty surrounding Peggy's fate seemed to linger in the air. Then, in 2016, a breakthrough. After 15 years of searching, Peggy's skeletal remains were found in a wooded area near Rodechebrunn in Thuringia. A mushroom picker stumbled upon the remains, and DNA tests confirmed the identity as Peggy Knobloch. But the discovery raised even more questions. The remains were incomplete. There were no personal belongings, no school bag, no clothes. How had her body ended up so far from where she was last seen? Why had it taken so long for her remains to be found? These were the questions that plagued investigators and the public. But the case took another strange turn when traces of DNA belonging to Uwe Bernhardt, a member of the right-wing terrorist group National Socialist Underground, were found at the site where Peggy's remains were discovered. However, this lead was eventually ruled out when it was determined that the DNA had been transferred to the site by forensic equipment. In 2018, a new suspect emerged, Manuel S., a man who had been a friend of Knobloch's. Knobloch had mentioned him in earlier interviews, and police began to look more closely at his involvement. Manuel S. was questioned and admitted to having received Peggy's lifeless body from another individual. He claimed he had tried to resuscitate her before disposing of her body in the wooded area. However, his testimony was inconsistent and doubts about his credibility grew. In December 2018, Manuel S. was arrested but was released shortly after due to a lack of evidence. Despite the investigation, Peggy's case remained unsolved, and the investigation was officially closed in October 2020. With more than 6,000 pieces of evidence, 250 expert reports, and countless interrogations, the authorities had failed to provide a definitive answer about Peggy's fate. The Peggy Knobloch case remains one of the most haunting and unresolved true crime mysteries. A young girl went missing, a man was wrongfully convicted, and a broken justice system failed to uncover the truth for years. Despite the controversial convictions, the retrials, and the painful discovery of Peggy's remains, the question that remains unanswered is, who killed Peggy Knobloch? As the years pass, the case continues to linger in the public consciousness, a chilling reminder of the fragility of truth and justice. What do you think happened to Peggy Knobloch? Do you believe the right person was convicted? Or do you think the real killer is still out there? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories where the mysteries are dark and the questions remain. The file may be closed, but the truth still waits to be uncovered.